Welcome to Music Ed Tech Talk, a podcast exploring the topics of music, education, technology, and the intersections between them, with a special focus on the productive and creative process. I'm your host, Robby Burns.
Yeah, so what have you been gaming on? And I say this in full disclosure that I haven't. I think the last time I played a video game was the latest Smash Bros. On the Switch, which was like Christmas.
Yeah, that's not...
last year.
That's, honestly, for a working professional, that's really... You're up on the recent stuff.
I don't feel up. I don't feel up on the recent stuff, but I will accept that.
So I've got friends, and I also read enough about video games where, I've got people and sources that are connecting me to the industry. So I'm more enthusiastic about what's happening in the gaming universe than I am actually dedicated to playing games. I don't really have a lot of time during the school year. So Mary and I will sneak in stuff like, we play a level of Yoshi together.
Sure.
Maybe like once a night, or we've been playing a lot of Overcooked, which is this game where you're like you're little chefs and you have to work in a frantic kitchen to cook meals really quickly. But the single player action and role playing stuff is typically not something I have time for. However, I did play the Spider-Man game for the PlayStation that came out earlier this year, and then I've more recently been a good friend got me a copy of the remake of Final Fantasy XII for the Switch.
Oh, so let me just back up for 1 second. So for the 2-player kind of cooperative games, you mentioned that you and Mary are playing Overcooked.
Yes.
Was there was a string of games like that, or was that just Overcooked?
Overcooked is one of the games that we've been playing the most together since December.
Yeah.
We'll play a level of Yoshi here and there.
Okay. How is that? How is Yoshi?
Yoshi is delightful. It's very cute. It's not... Well, it's challenging a little later in the game. Like, okay, I don't want to make myself sound like a noob. Like, it's hard enough that, like, if you want to get all the stuff, which is kind of the point of the game, you gotta play the levels over and over again.
Right.
The overall pacing and feeling of controlling the characters is a little floaty and forgiving. It's intended to be able to be played by kids, real little kids. So,
right.
We, will sometimes get frustrated at how flimsy the characters feel to maneuver. Like, it's really easy to, like, jump on someone's back or, like, swallow them whole and spit them out by accident.
Gotcha.
It's a delightful game. It's fun. I wouldn't say, like, if you've got limited time and finances, I would not recommend that you dedicate your life to Yoshi.
Not a high priority, Yoshi. Have you seen that meme of Yoshi riding a horse, and the meme is that when the oppressed want to become the oppressor?
No, I have not.
That's why I'm interested in Yoshi, is because of that meme.
Yoshi is certainly like on the tip of everyone's tongue. Like, everyone is aware that Yoshi is a franchise and is a game that is delightful. I guess more people are probably playing it than I would suspect. The thing that I like about it is that on the Venn diagram of games that Mary and I can play together, it sits pretty high on the list of stuff that's in the middle of both circles.
Yeah, and that's why I was interested. I'm interested in those kinds of games because solo play gets a little bit old after a while, right?
Yeah, it does, unless you're like me and you have, like, the couple of weeks after school ended where I was just kind of sitting around, there was like a mental need to just sit on the couch a lot and put my mind into a story that was not my life.
Right.
Like a need to disengage. So I think this is a long way of saying that the single player games are like I wasn't doing any of that. So it was really nice to, for like a week or two, just sit down on the couch and like sling some webs and fly around New York City for a couple of hours a day.
That's the idea.
It's the dream, I think.
That's the dream. Well, yeah, thanks for recommending Overcooked and Yoshi. I've been looking for I've been looking to take advantage of the Switch's like cooperative play.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, we're like 25 minutes in, and if someone is listening to this, they've probably noticed a couple of very different features about the experience of the experience of this episode. Like, probably the artwork looks very different. Chances are you were like, wait, I don't subscribe to Music Ed Tech Talk. What is happening right now?
Right.
And then, is this a new show about, maybe I subscribed to this a few weeks ago. Let's give it a try. And then 20 minutes of people talking about Nintendo Switch. Can we, there's a reason I wanted to have you on for this particular episode. Of course. So you are the very, very first guest on the podcast, Robby Burns and Friends. And you were also actually my very first, we had a very short-lived 6-episode podcast a couple of years back. It was like my first experience with what podcasting is. And, it's been a couple of years. I'm going through some changes on this show. And I thought that who better than you to kind of help me usher in what I'm considering like a rebrand or a rebirth of Robby Burns and Friends.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so let's just, if we could, just kind of talk through this for a second here. This is the first episode of a rebrand. I'm calling the show Music Ed Tech Talk, which I think is a representation of what 90% of the topics on the show revolve around, although we just, I think, proved that sometimes that was a big 10% that we just addressed right there. I mean, I was finding that the more and more I did the show, the idea was like I wanted to just talk with good friends about mutual interests. And it just so happens that as a professional music educator with an interest in technology, all the people who were coming on the show were either talking to me about things they were doing with technology in their lives, or we were just talking about music. And it just, and then increasingly so recently, I've had specifically like names in the field of music education on the show. So I thought it made sense that for someone who has never listened to or heard of this show, like if they're directed towards it by someone, like if they're saying, where do I go to find a podcast about music education and technology? Someone is telling them, oh yeah, Music Ed Tech Talk. They're going to remember that a lot better than they're going to remember Robby Burns and Friends.
Sure.
So while I have enjoyed the spirit of that title, which is, me talking with friends, I thought it was better to give future listeners a sense of expectation what the show is about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I've got some nice new artwork courtesy of Ryan Bailey, and I'm looking forward to focusing the show a little bit more on these topics because, when I talk about music education and technology, more people listen. So,
right.
Those must be the things that people like to hear me address.
Yeah, and I think in terms of what's your wheelhouse, when I think about what I know about you, I think it makes perfect sense, right? There's two topics that probably dominate a lot of our discussion that we've had, and those topics are, no surprises here, music and technology. I think the new element for me is the education part. So I did have a question for you, if you don't mind my posing you a question that about music education.
Sure.
I think you're a naturally fantastic educator, and the reason why I say that is because I've observed that you have patience, right? So I don't by trade, I'm not a music educator, but I do music almost every day of my life. And inevitably, I find myself in a music education context where I'm either being asked to educate someone else in some way, teach, I'd like to learn piano, or I'd like to teach me what you know about X, right? Maybe it's harmony, maybe it's something in music theory. And I just find that I'm impatient as an educator. Like I'm not a great educator because I lack patience. And the form that usually takes is that I become a little bit frustrated with the education process. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of being myself as a very poor math student. I would ask my friends, can you explain this to me? I don't understand it. And I could see the frustration on their face, because it was like, I think it was my asking them this question was sort of like, well, why is 1 + 1 2? Can you tell me why? Right. Like, I think they felt frustrated that I wasn't getting it, because to them it was completely obvious and clear. Right. And sometimes I feel that pain when I'm trying to teach someone something about music. In my mind, I think, what do you mean you don't understand? This is a fifth, right?
Yeah.
It just is a fifth. I don't need, what else do I need to tell you? And I'm not normally a curmudgeon as a person, right? I'm usually not a grouch. But as a music educator, sometimes I wonder how other educators do it. How do people do it? Is there a patience muscle that you can strengthen? Are some people just more naturally gifted with patience? Do you have thoughts about this? Have you talked about it before?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad you're going here, because it allows me, I want to address that. But I think the very birth of your question deserves some attention. I just want to stay meta for another minute or two say, like, you not having education be a domain of your professional life is precisely the reason I wanted to have you start this rebrand with me. And it's precisely the reason why I thought that by having you, it would be a great springboard into the topic of like, okay, I'm rebranding the show to set up a better expectation for what listeners should hear about. And that's going to mean, like, I've already got a lot of names in music education technology lined up to interview. But what I don't want someone to get the impression about this rebrand is that this is a show about music technology education. Like, this is a show where if you're like if you teach GarageBand to kids, like, I'm going to be giving you information about how to do that better every week. That's not really how I conceive of the show. I think of the show more as like music, ed, tech, talk, 3 separate interests and domains of my personal and professional life that will get addressed, but sometimes unevenly. Like, I'm totally cool. Sure. Had you not asked that awesome question, I would be fine with ignoring the topic of teaching this episode.
Right.
Right. So I think that deserves to be said. On to your question now. I think that this clicked for me. Like, this is one of the things that needed to click for me before I could really get excited about the teaching profession. And the 2 things that needed to happen for me, and both of them fortunately happened kind of, I guess you could say organically. I don't like to use that word, but I also got kind of lucky by having very inspiring educators and musicians in my path. I don't think that I would be where I am had I not had musicians who drew. Like, I'm a late bloomer as a musician. Like, I didn't even learn how to practice correctly until I was halfway through my graduate degree in percussion performance.
Sure.
So having people in front of me who taught me the value and the joy of making a statement through an audible performance, like, that was the first ingredient that I did not have a complete picture of until I was an undergraduate student. Like, there was a very big chance that I was just going to go through the motions of college, maybe pump out a music ed degree by the end, and then like get some teaching job somewhere and not really love it, maybe quit and then pivot to something else.
Interesting.
The other ingredient that helped was that I had some really great teaching models and mentors in that experience who really framed my expectation of what teaching is. And to me, teaching is a celebration and an exercise of process. And if you can learn to accept that the fun part of being a musician is the routine circular process of gradual continuous improvement, then you will never be unhappy when a kid can't understand what a perfect fifth is or play a scale in tune, because you will be thinking the joy of doing a job professionally, I feel like, is how much you enjoy solving the problems that job presents for you in a creative way. And I still, at least now in my career, get excited about asking those questions. Like, why does this 11-year-old not understand how to play this rhythm? Like, what is the way that takes their mind? How do I demystify this really simple subject for me, but that to them is foreign? How do I take that and make it into something that's very, very easy for them to understand? And that's what teaching is. Teaching is just making things that are unfamiliar, stripping away the curtain and making them appear as simple and minimal as they actually are.
Right.
And so solving that problem is very engaging to me. And so I would say like patience is born out of that. I don't feel that it does kind of grow. Like I guess you could say it's a muscle. I'm certainly more patient and understanding of middle schoolers, which I teach now, than I was at the beginning of my career. I'm more empathetic towards them. I think I understand what they're going through better. I think I have more realistic expectations of what they should be able to do musically. But the urge to get up out of bed in the morning and do it again, knowing that what they bring is inconsistent, sometimes just bad. To me, it's not about that. It's about how do we get from point A to point B?
Right. Normally the guest isn't supposed to be the one asking all the questions, but there is one more follow-up question I have to ask based on something you said.
Okay.
You said that you never learned how to practice correctly until your graduate studies came around, which I think a lot of people can relate to. I didn't study at the graduate level in music, but I can certainly relate to this feeling of not being satisfied with how I practice and the method of practice. I can also relate to, or at least I can say for myself, I've often felt that there isn't enough discussion, even with my best teachers, and I've had some amazing teachers. I've always wanted more meta-level discussion about the method that we use to get better. Right. We usually spent a lot of our time, for one reason or another, on what the goal is, what piece are we trying to play, or what mood are we trying to achieve, what technique are we trying to evoke from our fingers, whatever, right? The discipline itself, as opposed to the method for getting there. So I'm super curious about your thoughts on how to practice correctly. And I say that as someone who, I'm still dissatisfied with how I practice. I find that, I think everyone can relate to this, I spend a lot of time on what I already know because it feels good to play what you already know, right? And that's inefficient, and I know it's inefficient, but I do it anyway. So I can come up with a million examples of ways that I'm dissatisfied with how I practice, but that wouldn't be helpful, right? So I'm really curious about what you learned about practicing, because I'm still trying to improve how I do that.
Yeah, I think the urge to play what's familiar is one. I mean, this is such a big topic, that it's hard to really cover it all, because there's no singular tentpole belief I have about practice that defines what it is. But I would say that a part of it is that discipline to be able to look at something unfamiliar and fixate on that and be really, really comfortable and satisfied in breaking that apart, demystifying it for yourself. I mean, ultimately, as much as a teacher's job is to demystify a subject for a student's job when they practice is to demystify a subject for themselves. And
interesting.
You have to, in the case of, I'm going to try to use a subject something that I practice enough, but that I know that you have probably also practiced in your career playing jazz piano, that we can sort of speak in the same plane here. But I think, like, for me, practicing a 2-5 pattern in my left hand in a particular voicing in all 12 keys, that's an example of something that I am not as familiar in some keys as I am in others. So for me, a positive practice habit might be fixating on those challenge keys, and what might be a negative practice habit would be to continue to just play in the key of C, B flat, where I have to wrap my head around less theory.
Yep.
And I think there's a merit to playing what's familiar, because, for example, as a drum set player, you have to be really familiar going cha, cha. So,
of course.
So practicing that familiar pattern a lot makes you more and more solid at something that drummers do 95% of the time, which is steady timekeeping. But the unfamiliar stuff is what I try to gravitate towards. And I think the number one thing that I learned about practice was just that, like, how extremely slow you have to be willing to go in order to take something unfamiliar and get it under your hands.
Yep.
And the sheer amount of repetition that you have to do in order to solidify the muscle memory. But even before those two things, there has to be some sort of strategic attitude about how to break down a problem.
Right.
For me, my problem with practicing 2-5s in the left hand is that in extreme flat keys, I just don't play in them as comfortably. So I have to think a lot harder about, like, where C flat fits under my finger. And for me, I have to hear both, like, create a visual map of that fingering on the keyboard layout, but also have in my head that sound of, a 7 chord or whatever chord it might be ringing in my ear before I can, like, really make that full connection. I don't know if this is hitting on what you're hitting at.
It's hitting on so many things. For one thing, I've just realized after listening to you kind of recap some of those points, not only do they ring true for music, but for me, they ring true for learning almost anything that's worth learning. Like, in this case, I have in mind, like, learning about software and learning about new programming concepts. Like what your descriptions were bringing to mind memories that I have of painful weeks trying to wrap my head around something that I had convinced myself I would never understand, right? And one thing in particular that you said was that I think it was you need a discipline to be able to look at something unfamiliar, right, and demystify it for yourself. And that is so key. I mean, I can't tell you how much procrastination I've had that has been born out of, like, this fear that I'm about to spend a lot of time failing to learn something new because it's just too hard or it's just over my head, right? And then you dive into it, and perhaps you have the right resource or someone gives you the right explanation, or you just spend enough time with it, then suddenly, click, there's this epiphany or this moment of, you know what, I think I learned a new piece of this. Not the whole thing yet, but there is a piece of this that I really, truly believe I understand now, and I can put into practice. And slowly you build confidence until, bam, you pretty much have it. You have the concept, and now you're the person encouraging other people that they should do it. And what's funny is that I realized that it doesn't matter how many times you do this, it's a struggle every single time. And that sounds very zen, but I've found it to be, in practical terms, 100% true. Like, for some reason, I've learned a lot of stuff that I never thought I would understand. And still, when it comes time to learn something new that is unfamiliar, to use your word, it's still a struggle, at least for me. I still have to overcome all those old barriers, probably the same barriers I was overcoming, in 5th grade, learning. Here's a great one. The first time I played a sharp 9 intentionally, I remember my teacher said, all right, it's time to practice this new sound. It's this sharp 9 sound, and you can use it on the 5 and a 2-5-1, and it sounds great. Everyone uses it. You're going to love it. And I went home and I played them, And I came back to him the next week and I played through them, and he said, okay, you know, fix this one thing, or you should watch this one key, or you should practice it at a slower tempo, whatever. And I said, you know what, I have a question. And he said, okay, sure, go ahead. And I said, you know, I'm just going to be honest here. I know you know what you're talking about, but I don't like the way this sounds. And he kind of chuckled. And I said, no, really, I'm concerned. Like, am I missing something? When would you ever use this? It doesn't sound good. And he said, you know, this is quite common, but trust me, believe me, this is used every jazz musician who's ever lived has played a sharp 9. You're going to need this. It'll make sense. Just sit with it another week and you'll love it. And sure enough, right? I sat with it another week, 2 weeks, whatever it was. And suddenly I don't know anything else. Like suddenly I can't remember a time when I didn't like it. But I know I can remember uttering those words to him.
This is why I use the word unfamiliar with my students as much as I can, because they want to use words like hard, bad, ugly, gross, like words like to them in their worldview, you know, things that are not comfortable to them are untouchable or repulsive. And you have to turn that around. And you said something interesting that I want to bounce back to, like this idea of applying this approach to every other place in life is precisely why it's another reason why I love teaching and have the patience for it. Like music is my vehicle, but it's certainly not the thing that I feel like I'm teaching to kids.
Right.
Because if you look at it from another perspective, like I'm teaching in a very traditional concert band atmosphere. You know, we have trumpets, clarinets, tenor saxophones, tubas. Like we're playing concert band literature, the same music you played in middle school on clarinet, probably. And you know, that is not the only kind of musical style I'm passionate about or excited about, but it's a vehicle. You know, we have this structure of music education in our country that is built around, you know, choir, orchestra, band, but I don't feel like at its core I'm teaching someone to be a concert band musician. I feel like the process of learning is what I'm teaching, and other things too, teamwork and you know, of course, an appreciation and an ear for music and quality of sound. But you know, at its core, there's like principles that are completely unrelated to music itself that I think are being instilled. At least I hope.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I find that the more and more things I learn, the more I realize that a lot of the time what I'm learning isn't the thing itself. For example, how to draw a portrait. I think what I'm learning is a process, and that process, it turns out, can be applied in many, many domains, not just drawing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
I've been reading this incredible book I would recommend to anyone, not just people that are interested in drawing. It's really famous. It's called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain by Betty Edwards. And the introduction isn't about drawing at all. It's about neurology and the brain. And that alone convinced me I had the right book in my hands, because someone who really understands how to teach and someone who understands how to convey content or information to someone else has to, at some point, has to learn something about how the brain works and how humans absorb information, right? And so a lot of what you do when you're learning to draw is making things that you think are familiar unfamiliar. So, you know, they'll have you draw something by turning it upside down, so that you don't see something as a flower in a vase, right? You just see this upside down thing that might be a flower in a vase. And now only then can you begin to draw it, right? So, yeah, just really interesting how you can take something like music, in our case, and it turns out that what you thought you were learning, music, was entirely something different, which is kind of like a process about learning and about how to learn more quickly, let's say. Yeah.
I'm big into the idea that you're presenting there. I mean, I'm the kind of person who, like, I spent a little bit of this summer earlier rereading The Inner Game of Tennis, and I'm paging
that's another
through.
one.
Yeah, I'm paging through a book right now called The Natural Rider that I read in grad school, which is a horseback riding book, but it's actually a book about the natural learning process. And I'm really into these, gravitating towards these sort of interdisciplinary thinkers who understand exactly that, the learning process, and then sort of taking that and applying it to an artistic domain and figuring out how to make the most of that. Because the thing about the natural rider is, I mean, this is a horseback riding instructor who couldn't care less about the technique of horseback riding. This is someone who believes that just as everyone is innately able to walk or speak, they're innately able to ride a horse, if you let your mind more naturally respond to the feedback of your body when it fails.
Right.
Which is essentially the message of the inner game of tennis. It's like you've got these two parts of your brain, or these two selves, this kind of judgmental, analytical part, and then this spontaneous, free part. The spontaneous, free part is actually perfectly capable of coaching itself if you don't attach any of that fear or judgment of your terrible performance to yourself.
Right. Yeah, it's fascinating because the inner game of tennis, I don't think ever uses the phrase natural learning process. Maybe it does, but it certainly didn't feature prominently in the book, right? But I think that's exactly kind of the primary focus of the book is positing that there is this natural learning process that you can use that no one really uses in tennis or athletics in general. And then it turns out that can be applied to a great many things, great other disciplines.
Oh, right? Absolutely. And upon, I think this was my second or third read through, it became clear to me, or at least clearer on this read through, that the author of the book, Timothy Galloway, is not even in his mind, tennis is not even the game he's playing. Like there's a different game, and that is exactly what it is. It's the inner game. But these philosophies are not attractive to people because I think in the case of athletics, people take an immense amount of pride in the natural feats that their body can accomplish, the challenges that they can conquer, the other performers or players they can conquer, and the pride that we take in that makes it incredibly easy to both celebrate ourselves when we're successful and judge and diminish ourselves when we're not.
Right.
But if you can shift, and I feel like this is going to be a major theme in my teaching this year, like if you can shift that game to something more internal where you are taking pride and joy in that process rather than in any, snapshot of an artistic performance itself, I think that we can go far with that attitude.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this, all of the games that he talks about in the book. So he talks about different games of tennis, right? One of them is I'm going to butcher the terminology he uses. He talks about some people are playing the pride game, some people are playing the social game, like, hey, I want to have friends who play tennis because that benefits me in life, right?
Right.
Or the pride game, or hey, I want to play tennis because I like the feeling of victory against an opponent. It makes me feel good when I win. Right?
Yes.
There's all kinds of different games, and I think what he means by games is there's different reasons why you're even on the court, right? And the same could be true of music or learning technology or anything, right? There's different reasons why you're there. Sure, when you're young, people force you, right? People sign you up for ballet lessons, they sign you up for art lessons, they sign you up for extracurricular STEM programs, right? In engineering and math and science. But at a certain point, you decide what you show up to, right? And you have that kind of forces you to ask yourself, well, why am I picking this and not some other thing, right? Like, especially today where you can learn anything. I mean, you can just go online and for a very cheap or no cost, pick a completely new discipline and just go, right? It could be writing, it could be deep learning and machine learning, it could be audio engineering, it could be the guitar because you never got around to that. All of these like materials, learning materials, are for everyone now, democratized. It's easy to break into stuff. So it forces you to ask yourself why you've picked what you've picked to spend your time on. And this was somewhere I was going to go. I wasn't sure if it was kind of appropriate or a natural. It's kind of tangential to what we've been talking about. But how do you, in today's world, how do you even decide what to do? Because take me for example. I'm getting into synthesizers and sound design, and I'm trying to learn more about different ways you can use an oscillator and how envelopes work as a concept. And then I'm also learning about, techniques in Ableton and digital audio workstations. Like when would I want to use a vocoder as opposed to a vocal synth, or just auto-tuning and layering a bunch of tracks on each other. There's all these different things I could be learning. So why am I learning the things that I'm learning? What reasons can I give?
Yes, that is such a fascinating thing to think about, because the more you learn to play the inner game, the more the trade itself diminishes and kind of fades into the background. Like I almost feel now, had I had the skill set I have at, knowing how to, so to speak, learn how to learn, if I had a better sense of that earlier in my life, I might be finding equal joy doing something entirely non-musical with my life.
Right.
And that's a fascinating thing. And I'm sorry before I directly answer the question you just posed, I've got the inner game of tennis out here. It's chapter 8, the games people play on the court. There's like the good O, the aim is to achieve excellence or to prove oneself good. There's the friends O, to make friends. There's the health and fun, and then there's like subtypes that he categorizes within each. I am I am playing, or at least at one point in my career was playing what Galloway calls the health and fun subtype C game. I'm sorry, subgame C, which is the learn O. The played out of self two's desire to learn and grow, and the aim is to evolve. The motive is the enjoyment of learning, and there are no external obstacles. The tendency is to, of course, is to be drawn into the games that the self one wants to play. In other words, the more analytical, judgmental part of the brain. But then he ends this chapter this way, which I think highlights how sort of elusive this concept still is to me, as much as I've read this book. For the first time, I recognized the existence of the inner game and its importance to me. I didn't know what the rules of the game were, nor exactly what its aim was, but I did sense that it involved something more than winning a trophy. And that's all I've got. Because I don't know how to otherwise address your question, other than to say, like, certainly no external factor is motivating me to do what I do. I mean, certainly, like, when I have an opportunity to teach, like I'm directing, our district's middle school honor band this year. Like, that's an honor. That feels good to me that I get that. You know what I mean? Like, that fills me with pride that I get to do that. But certainly it's not a primary motivation for being a music teacher, because it's still, as much as, I'm not trying to be cynical, but like, it really doesn't pay nearly what it should. And it's very ungratifying at times and uphill. So,
Yeah. You just provided a lexicon from Inner Game of Tennis that's useful for posing the right question. And I think the question that I want to pose is like, okay, suppose everyone gets to the point where they're playing Learn O. Suppose everyone gets to the point where they realize, you know what, I'm not doing this for money. I'm not doing this for my partner. I'm not doing this for friends. I'm just doing this because I enjoy learning. If you get to that point, then you realize, well, wait a minute. I can enjoy learning anything. It doesn't have to be tennis. It doesn't have to be music. It doesn't have to be drawing. It doesn't have to be basket weaving. So what should which domain should I enjoy the game of Learno? And that's a really difficult question to ask, one that I don't expect there to be a single monolithic answer. But it's worth talking about in this context, at least briefly, because I think, especially when you're in a student-teacher relationship or mentor-mentee relationship, at some point this comes up. Why are we here? Like, why are we in this room giving instruction right now? Why are we spending our time this way? The motivation has to be addressed once a student becomes serious, right?
Yep.
And it's just worth at least having a language to use to describe the problem or the questions. And I think, sure, of course, I think we all agree that Learno is the game that everyone should be playing. Trying to teach people how to play Learno is difficult, especially if the students are young. And then, but even as adults, I think none of us can fully answer the question about, well, why are we playing Lerno with music, or why are we playing Lerno with coffee?
Well, I want to kind of just take this, sorry, am I cutting you off here?
No. That's it. Go.
I want to like just avert this question entirely and bounce it straight back to you, because one of the other reasons I wanted to have you on this week is I do think that there's enough people who listen to my show who fall into this category that it's not off base here. I think part of the listening base of this show would find themselves in a musical or a teaching field, but with an intense interest in technology. And what you have done, pivoting from law to programming, is something that, though music is not your starting point, I have a feeling that there are a handful of people listening to this show who have, like myself, thought about what it would be like to move from music or teaching to something with technology. So, I mean, why did you move from law to programming?
Yeah, I think that's really multifaceted. There's a couple of reasons. One is that I think a lot of programmers can say this, I had early exposure to it. It's easier to get into something like programming where, let's face it, there used to be a mythology. There used to be this image. When you think of the programmer, what does he or she look like? They're wearing a hoodie, they're young, they're in a basement with no lights on, there's a green glow coming from the monitor with inscrutable symbols flowing across them, and they're in a state of flow, effortlessly communicating with the machine, right? And the reality is, like, learning programming and coding is a craft not unlike learning how to make great coffee, or learning how to fix something in your car, or learning how to write a good short story, or learning how to play a diminished scale. Really, I mean, it's no different than learning any difficult thing that you've already learned. If you've learned something difficult, you can learn to program. So when you ask why did it happen for me, one of the reasons was I wasn't worried about this. I didn't have this barrier that I see in a lot of other people, this mental barrier of thinking, I can't do that. That's for other people that aren't like me, right? And fortunately, I mean, in 2019, there's a little bit less of that than there was in 2007 when I wrote my first program or whatever. So how did it, part of the answer to why it happened is the how. And how it happened was, I picked up, I'm sure everyone was required to buy a TI-83 calculator for high school math. You had to buy one. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it came with this big door stopper of a manual about the implementation of BASIC that they ship with the calculator. So I had a friend group that was really into programming, and I was the only one. I was sort of the odd man out who didn't program at all. And I was a young high schooler who was competitive and thought I could do anything my friends can do. So they were all creating their own games on their TI-83 calculators, which is much better than actually learning how to use the calculator to do the math we were required to do, right?
For sure.
So I tried to figure out how to animate a little dot, a pixel on the calculator screen whenever you click the left arrow. I said, if I can do that, then I can create a game. And sure enough, I just picked up the manual, started reading it in this road trip, and by the end of the road trip, I had a little dot moving around on the screen. And I thought, okay, I got the dot to move. I can make a game. And so that was the beginning of it for me. I think the most relevant experience and exposure I had with programming was web development. I took a course in college about HTML, JavaScript, CSS. And so early exposure helps. But it's not a barrier if you don't have it. Because of my early exposure, later on, when I was getting ready to launch a legal career, finishing up my last year of law school, I started seeing opportunities at the intersection between law and technology. And it's sort of the nature of technology that there's an intersection with everything. You can combine what you know about technology with music, with law, with coffee, whatever, right? And we're seeing that today. So I saw intersections between law and technology, and I saw that there wasn't there weren't that many people exploring that intersection. So I dove in and built an online expungement app, and it was the most exciting thing that I did. I mean, while I was in law. And so that's when I realized, you know what, I'm just going to do this technology thing. Like it's incredibly exciting. I'm having a great time doing it. There's a lot of opportunity. Why pretend like this is just a side thing when I want to make it my main thing? So that was sort of the how that it happened. When it comes to more into the why, certainly I felt that my impact was greater. I felt that I was having a greater impact as a person doing technology than I was doing law. And impact is sort of a magic word that people use all over the place. If you're in the nonprofit space, you always want to measure your impact. If you're in the for-profit space, you often want to measure your impact. So what does it mean? Why is it meaningful? That's going to be different for every person. I do think everyone has a sense for the impact that they have or they don't have, right? I do think at some point, if you're forced to ask the right questions, you do realize, you know what, when I was on that field hockey team, I had an enormous impact, right? I was able to turn this team around, or I was able to, change the lives of other people that I played with. And when I was, when I was studying for, when I was writing my thesis, I was having zero impact, mm-hmm. right? At some point, everyone will be able to answer that question
right.
for themselves. And so that was what I realized pretty quickly. And that's why I'm still doing what I'm doing today.
Yeah.
Does that help answer your question? Because there's plenty more I could say about it. I'm not sure which parts you wanted to touch upon.
Yeah, I think go ahead.
I think what I want to say specifically about music and technology is I have a lot of musician friends, as I know you do too. And sometimes I just instinctively feel that they're missing this opportunity because they're so talented and they're so able to do their craft, and their level of focus when they practice and when they shed, it's amazing. And sometimes I feel that that isn't reflected in the monetary compensation that they get for their craft, if any, right?
Yep.
And the reason why I feel like there's a missed opportunity is because I know that the talents that these folks have can easily be applied to something like technology, where they can be fairly compensated for all their hard work and their passion. But the gap is twofold. One, they don't believe that they can do it. Or two, if they do believe that they can do it, they don't believe that they'll like it. And it's just not true. I don't know how, it's hard to back that up. But from my own experience, I enjoy writing programs almost as much as I enjoy writing songs.
That makes sense to me. I think the thing, though, is, and this is coming back to my point about what line of work do you most enjoy creatively solving the problems of? I do, and this could be for a variety of reasons, but there have been a number of summers in the past 10 years of my life where I'll go to lynda.com and I'll boot up the class in JavaScript, and I'll sit down and I'll say, okay, this is the summer where I'm going to get a couple of fundamentals under my belt on how to write in JavaScript. And I do hit a breaking point each time. And mm-hmm. that breaking point, I am tempted to say is, you know what, maybe I, at my core, do not enjoy solving problems through this process. Mm-hmm. That could be false. That could be... Because ultimately, I do have high aspirations for what I think I could accomplish on my computing devices with JavaScript. And of course, I don't want to code or change career. I just want to be able to make my computer do more work for me.
Sure.
But there is this breaking point where I do ask myself that question, would I enjoy this as a career? Right. And I don't know if solving these problems is as engaging to me as something else. But then again, I have not had any teacher in my life who has demystified coding for me in the same way that I had great teachers who demystified teaching and music for me.
Right. Well, there's no question in my mind that everyone can do it. Just like I fully believe that everyone can do algebra, right? I think the real question is, not the real question, but I think separate from whether you can do it is whether you want to or you should, right? And those are two different things. So I don't have answers for whether someone should do it, but I do firmly believe that everyone can. And I think if you know your goal, that helps a lot. Like if you already know, you know what, like the reason why I'm learning this is because I really enjoy automating my own workflows on my own personal machine. That can help guide what you learn, right? Like, again, when you're learning anything, it's going to come back to this question of why you're even learning it, right?
Right.
So, maybe maybe what that means is that I should be a game developer, because the first time that I sat down to learn BASIC was to create a game. And I'm not a game developer, but I think here, let me create a more rich analogy for you. So we're both musicians. We've both spent a lot of time both practicing and performing, and we've being paid to perform. In your case, being paid to teach. There's a lot of experience there. Music is a perfect topic for us to try to answer or discuss how we answer this ongoing question, which is, okay, so we have some skills with music. Now what do we do with it? We've invested a lot of time and thought and practice and energy in this thing we call music. What's the next step? And I think that there are a lot of people that have something like a trade or a profession or a set of skills that they feel confident using, right? But there is, I think it's not often discussed, like, how do you answer the question of, okay, so what do I do next with this? Is it someone offers me a management promotion, and now instead of making the songs, I'm managing a team that makes the songs, or instead of writing the programs, I'm managing the team that writes the programs, and I don't write anymore. Or is there something else? Do you break off and you start your own company from scratch? Or do you break off and you completely shift and you move from education into something else, or you move from something else into education? I guess there's this question about how to evolve once you've established yourself with a particular domain, right? And in order to answer that question, you need to know something about how do I want to have impact, or what impact do I want to make, or what really lights me up when I do this, and how do I do more of that, right?
Yeah.
Do you ever think about that, or?
Yeah, my resounding thought as you're going through this is, I've worked through a lot of that. I think I'm at a point in my teaching career where I feel like I could continue to work through the same process for a number of more years and be very, very gratified just getting better at it. Teaching the same age at the same school, the same course load, but just getting more and more refined at my skills in precisely that environment. So I don't know if I'm asking myself what's next. Certainly teachers, a lot of teachers, especially music teachers, ask themselves, well, hey, maybe do I want to move to, up a grade, like move from middle school to high school, or maybe move to higher ed? I think that I've answered no for myself. For me, I've just been sort of expanding adjacently and outward. Like the technology thing for me has both embellished my teaching, but it's also a separate interest area. Like the very fact that I'm working on this podcast this summer and rebranding it, like this is a way for me to, I love the process of it. Like if no one listens to this show, I love doing this. It's very engaging and fun for me. Right. But it's also an exercise of other skill sets that I think are worth sharing with people.
Right.
And being someone who is attracted to a lot of different opportunities and people and experiences in life, it makes a lot of sense for me. Like I've come to terms with the fact that even though this is not exactly an extension of my skills in music education, it is a very engaging path for me. It doesn't make me money. So, there's that to wrestle with. But like you said, I mean, and what you said about people pivoting to teaching and pivoting to other careers from teaching is very interesting because, I mean, you're right. Like I am fully aware that the skills I have as an individual, not even the ability to learn how to learn, but even like the existing skills that I have could completely serve me in another career where I could probably make, a lot more than I do as a teacher. And one of the reasons why I haven't gone that path is because I am quite satisfied where I am. But another reason is this: I think a lot of people don't quite want to like shake up their entire lifestyle all at once. And for me, like, let's say that I was really, really digging into JavaScript and loving it. And because, we all know that you can learn how to code just with YouTube and,
Right.
like certainly let's say I'm going down that path and I'm ready for a career change. Like there would be a lot of very, very comfortable routines that I've established in my life that would have to come to a screeching halt in order for me to really make that happen. I mean, there are a lot of things about teaching music that I don't think about anymore because they're routines.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the biggest friction areas is not so much just learning the skills and components of a job, but also changing the routines.
Yep.
And some people find a way to do it a little bit at a time, which is, I think, the healthiest way to change a career. But, there always is, I'll call it the grind. There's going to be a grind at a certain point. And I think there's going to be a point for any career changer that's going to be a little bit more uphill than the rest of it. I mean, certainly like just the very fact that I know which direction on 29 I'm going when I go to work is just one of like 1,000 little tiny conveniences that when you add it up makes up my very, very comfortable teaching workflow right now.
Totally. Yeah, it's interesting that the idea of routine cuts both ways. So when I think of routine, I think of a lot of really positive learning traits. For example, there's a method that I like to refer to via this community as high frequency output. So there's a community online called Futureland, I think. It's a community I found via producthunt.com. And it's the purpose of the community is to learn something new by proving to everyone that you at least did something every day. So you submit, if you're learning how to code, you submit maybe a little code snippet that you wrote that day, every single day. Or if you're learning how to play guitar, you submit a recording of you playing the guitar every single day, right? And they call it high, we refer to it as high frequency output as a way to learn something new, right? So the reason I bring that up is because it forces you into a routine, which is positive. This is good. Like the routine assists you in your goals to learn something new, right? Is to establish this routine and to do it every day so that it becomes ingrained. Like you said, so that the drummer can, he knows or she knows how to keep 129 beats per minute no matter what. Like without turning on a metronome, she can just start slamming, 4 on the floor at 129. Then there's the routine that can be bad. You can form bad routines and form bad habits, or you can get so addicted to routine that you never learn something that feels like a cataclysm because it breaks all your routines. So you might have a goal to change where you live, let's say, but you put off changing where you live for years because you know what, you'd have to relearn all the highways and you'd have to get rid of a bunch of stuff and then you'd have to meet all these new people. And you know what, it feels pretty good where I'm at right now. And then you might kick yourself 10 years later when you finally move and you think, you know what, I should have done this 10 years ago. So, it's just interesting. I don't have too much more to say about it other than that there is some judgment involved in figuring out when routine is helping you and when it's hurting you. Does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would hope that it would never be something that would hinder my aspirations in my life, but I do try to become as efficient and effective a person as I can by embracing the correct routines into my life.
I guess this doesn't count as a routine, but it certainly illustrates the point I'm trying to make. In a very small, normal example, right, you can take someone who has a poor fingering on the saxophone or the piano, right? And a teacher can immediately observe the poor habit and call it out and say, you're going to need to get rid of that habit. We're going to have to undo that somehow, right? It happens every day.
Yep.
And maybe it doesn't count as routine, but I do feel that what is happening with the bad habit, with the fingering, is something that feels the same as what is happening with a bad routine. Overcoming that thing takes the same amount of effort. To force yourself to say, you know what, this will be uncomfortable the first week, but it has to happen one way or another if I'm going to achieve my goal.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
I think it gets to your original point when you said that you need to develop this discipline to be able to look at something unfamiliar and kind of dive into it or demystify it.
Yeah.
Giving up on the fact that you have the proper grip on your tennis racket is hard,
Yeah.
It means you have to learn how to swing a tennis racket from scratch almost. You're going to feel like, it was the first time you were stepping foot on that court. And that's not a good feeling because you spent all this time playing tennis already, right?
But this comes back to patience, because if you are someone who's playing the inner game, then your sight is not on judging your current ability set. You're, this is the inner game, I think, is, and a lot of the word I would use for something you mentioned a moment ago, and what I would use for someone improving their grip on a tennis racket would be superior concept. This is an idea that's presented in a book by Daniel Kohut about teaching musical performance. And the idea is that you can only be as good at something as the mental image of it that you have in your brain. And the inner game of tennis is, full of this kind of philosophy. I mean, he says, don't think about tightening your wrist. Instead, think about where you want the ball to go and imagine in your mind what a professional tennis player would look like with their backhand. And so, you get this kind of image in your mind. And if you're playing that game, it's not as depressing to start from the beginning, because what you're fixated on, like in your brain, you're seeing a professional.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like if that's the mental image that you have, then you're never gonna be sad if your actual bodily output is on the way there.
Right.
Unless you have, a different kind of attitude about it, which is, I try to not have that attitude, and I try to do my best with my students to not instill an attitude of, the success is the trophy itself. I mean, the musical performance is to some degree what we take pride in, because we love sharing our musical skills and making a statement for other people in an audience. But, the perfection or imperfection or, worth as perceived by others of our musical performances is not really where the prize is.
I think, one way that I've found is useful for putting this into practice, like if you're reading the inner game of tennis and you're asking yourself, like I play the drums, none of this makes sense to me. Or if you're reading the inner game of tennis and you're thinking, I'm an accountant. This doesn't help my accounting practice at all, right? One way to shake yourself out of that and to start to see how this ties in, just learn to skateboard. Like, get yourself out of your own thing, whatever that is, like accounting or software engineering or whatever it might be, and take up something new that you've just never done before that you could learn in a week or two. And for me, that thing was like skateboarding. I had never skateboarded before, and I don't remember what the impetus was for me to learn it. I think it's just like living in the Bay Area in general. Skateboarding is a little bit more common and practical. So what was great about skateboarding was there is a little bit of danger. You could fall, but not so much danger that you're worried that you're going to grievous bodily harm or end up in the hospital or walk into work with a bunch of black and blue all over you. And what it made me realize was whenever you learn something new, there's a huge amount of low-hanging fruit, an enormous amount of gain right up front when you learn it. So you go from not knowing how to skateboard to confidently skateboarding around, the sidewalks in your neighborhood in only a week. And that feeling of accomplishment is just addicting, right? You just feel like, what? 3 days ago I couldn't do this at all, and now I'm sitting here, saying that these skateboarders in front of me are going too slow, right? But then of course that curve dips. So in order to get to the point where you can start jumping over obstacles or performing tricks, it would take a lot of practice and commitment, right? So you have these high gains up front from trying something new, and then after you achieve those gains, it's a little bit harder to get better. It will take more time and more investment.
Yeah, I think a lot of skill sets are that way. Anyway, go on.
Yeah. So the reason why I bring that up is because it forces you, when I would step on that skateboard every day and think to myself, I know I can do this, right? I'm a grown adult. I see other people doing this. I know I can. But here I am sitting on the road. It's time to do it. And there's a little bit of fear. There's a little bit of like, I'm going to look like an idiot. Other people are going to watch this grown person struggling to skateboard. There's all those things that you face every day when you learn anything, not just skateboarding. But you can, those thoughts are more obvious in your head. They're a little bit more loud. You can hear yourself being like, if I fall, that guy over there is going to laugh, right? Or if I don't make this turn, I myself will be disappointed. No one will see me, but I'm going to feel shame or annoyance or frustrated and want to go home and sell this thing. And so because they're so loud and they're so obvious that they're there and there's nothing else to distract you from them, it forces you to confront them, and then you start feeling the inner game, the relevance and the practical advice that comes from the inner game of tennis. And then when you go back to accounting or whatever it is that you're trying to get better at, you can start to notice those thoughts more easily, and the relevance of books like The Inner Game of Tennis will become more clear to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. Total sense. I can't recommend it enough.
Yeah, it's a fantastic book.
Part of the rebrand effort on my part of this show is, obviously for the past hour and a half, we've been just talking back and forth, and that's going to remain more or less the bulk of the show. But I do feel like to bind together the episodes with some amount of relevance to music and technology, it would be worth me adding some segments to this show.
Sure.
And so I am adding there's sort of three things I'm kicking around in my head. The first thing that I didn't mention up front is that I am going to be forcing myself to compose a brand new brief 20-second jingle as the theme song to every episode.
Gotcha.
As a way to engage in the creative music-making process in a bite-sized fashion.
Cool.
Today's theme song, I have to title it too, of course. Today's theme song is titled Dr. Octavius Gets a Fresh Start.
Nice. I like it because it tells a story.
It does, doesn't it? Now, segment idea number 2, I just have to ask you, we're looking here at doing an app of the week and an album of the week on every episode, and I can think of no better person to ask, what tools in the app world are influencing your day-to-day, and what music is on your mind lately? What are you listening to?
Yeah. So I can speak to those. I'll do the app first. I really like this. Let's say I'm drawn to the concept more than the app itself. This isn't the only app that does this. So the app that I'm using for this is called Time. And what it does is, you and I have talked endlessly about productivity apps and specifically to-do list apps, right?
Yep.
And I can speak very specifically to what I want from a to-do list app. The problem that a to-do list app solves for me is that I get annoyed and frustrated with when a bunch of to-do things, I know I have to do a bunch of things and they're floating in my head and they're not written down anywhere in a single place. And this actually has a huge cost on productivity, because if your brain is distracted by fears that you're going to forget to do X, Y, and Z, then it can't focus deeply on the problem that requires deep focus, right?
Yeah.
So in order to eliminate those fears that you'll forget to do X, Y, and Z before tomorrow morning, you need to write those things down. And the problem is that I'm pretty bad about keeping paper on me at all times. So I can't write things down on paper. So that leaves my phone. So that leaves to-do apps. So that's why I think about to-do apps and try to find the right to-do app for me. The to-do app that I like is called Time, and the reason why I like it is because it's pretty simple. It's not that complicated like other to-do apps that I've used. They can get pretty complex where they have like their own framework and their own system, and you can label and tag and schedule and assign priorities to each thing. This is pretty simple, and it does a couple things really well, and that's why I like it. So one thing that it does really well is every single to-do item has three properties and three properties only. So one is the amount of time that you estimate it will take to complete that thing, right? So if it's, replacing the hubcaps on your car, you might say it's going to take, I don't know, how long does it take to do that? 30 minutes? I have no idea. But you can assign an estimated time for each thing that you need to get done. Then there's the doing it phase. So when you click on a to-do item that you want to complete, it starts the timer from the estimated time that you assigned it. So if it's the hubcaps example, it'll start counting down from 30 minutes. And the reason why that's useful for me is because it forces me to be really on the ball about that task. It forces me to say, you know what, this task really should only take 30 minutes. Why am I not going to hit that target? Is it because I'm checking my phone too much, or is it because I got distracted and I'm talking to my neighbor now? Right? It's just an aid that I find useful for getting a certain number of things done within a specified amount of time and not getting distracted from that. And the last thing that it does is if you have a bunch of to-dos lined up, it tallies the total amount of time that it will take. So you can kind of reasonably plan out, let's say, your morning or your afternoon, and know that, you know what, it's reasonable. Like these three things, they should take my whole morning. That's it. I'm not going to schedule anything else. Just these three things. It should take the whole morning.
Okay, fascinating.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I really like this twist. So to-do apps is a long discussed topic on the show, and it's very fraught because, I'm one of these people who's like experimenting with a new to-do app every couple of months or so.
Yeah.
And it's such a personal type of app, and none of them are really perfect because of the way that the human brain perceives. I mean, literally, we are made up of what we do. So, I can't. It's just a hard kind of thing to get around.
Right.
Okay. Let me just question, just so I can put this in the show notes. The app is called Time, like just the word time.
Yeah, that's what it's called.
It's on iOS?
Yeah, I'm using it on iOS. I don't know if they have an Android version, but I do know that the app has kind of a purple icon with a green kind of wave on it. So the reason why I'm describing how it looks is because I imagine if you search for the word time in the iOS App Store,
Time Magazine, a bunch of alarm clock apps. Yeah.
Right. So you look for the purple icon. I should know the developer or the company behind it. Let me see if I have that information so that you can kind of distinguish it from others. If you want to try it out.
Yeah. Thinking about this feature, you're so close to where I just want to say, just use OmniFocus.
Yeah, I need to revisit OmniFocus because they've been doing a lot of changing and evolving and in the right direction from what I've read. So I need to go check out what they've been doing lately. You can speak to that better than I can.
Yeah, I still feel like it's an application that I have a lot of friction with, in that it's not. In theory, OmniFocus is an app designed around being able to look at your to-dos from different perspectives. And that's for the paid pro version of it, that's like the main selling feature, which is that, hey, you can make these custom perspectives. Like my most used custom perspective is, okay, if I've got an item that's due soon, currently due, or overdue, or if it's on my today list and is also flagged, round up all that stuff and put it in one particular perspective. So it's basically just a bunch of high priority stuff. If it's due today, I gotta be on it. But if I finish all my to-dos for the day, or if nothing's due today, I want to be aware of what are all the things I can be working on today that I've marked important or flagged. And the reason for this is because with to-do managers, I'm very liberal about assigning tasks with the marking that they can be worked on today. I call this a today list. Lots of apps have this, like the app Things by Culture Code has a today list. And I like the idea of differentiating between what am I working on today versus when are things actually due? Like what is a deadline where I cannot survive that minute without having completed it? So pretty much a to-do app for me needs to have some sort of today list that can distinguish when, like the time or day something is due versus when am I working on it. The challenge with OmniFocus is, I think in their ideal world, you're able to create a custom perspective with so much control that you can design a world in which you are only ever looking at what's important in that moment. Like if I'm at work, I can have a work perspective. If I'm at home, I can have a home perspective. If I need to just really if I'm feeling under fire and I need to see only what's important, I've got a perspective for that.
Gotcha.
And I think they succeed. The problem is that perspectives take a lot of work to learn how to build. And you have to fuss with them a lot. And what I would really like from OmniFocus sometimes is just, hey, can you just show me all my stuff on my today list and let me like drag and drop the items in whatever order I want to do them, which is currently still not something that it does very well.
Yeah.
The reason I thought of it is because writing down how many minutes something will take is actually it's like a field when you create a task. So it's one of many, like you can say, when is this item deferred? When does it become available for me to begin working on? When is it due? The recent OmniFocus version has tags, so you can tag it. Like I've got a tag for, like maybe this is tagged errands, Home Depot. And tags can be assigned to location. So if I assign the Home Depot tag to the Columbia Home Depot, then when I drive past it, a little notification pops up on my phone with my list of tagged stuff, Home Depot.
Right.
You can tag it how many minutes you expect it'll work, and then you can create a perspective that organizes all of your short tasks. Or here's things that I've got a tag called avoiding. And it's like it's a perspective that basically shows me like long single item tasks that I have that are like a certain number of days old have been on my today list. Basically, it's like, hey, am I avoiding this? Yeah, show it to me here. So you have this level of customization. It's the good news is that OmniFocus is apparently going to be adding JavaScript. This is another reason I want to learn JavaScript later this year, where you're going to be able to practically program it to do whatever you want. And I have a feeling like one of my biggest friction points with it is that if you defer an item, say like I make an item available tomorrow, well, defer dates are sticky. So like if I defer it for tomorrow and then tomorrow comes, but then I don't do the task, well, the next day it's no longer on my deferred list. I have to like go back and hit the +1 button to, put it back on my, what's called, OmniFocus calls it the forecast. It's basically like here's everything you need to be thinking about today. And they did add a tag. You can like give one of your tags a special blessing where it'll show it in the forecast view regardless of when it's actually due. The problem with this is that sometimes I want to, quote, snooze a task, and there's no real way to snooze a tag. Like it's either tagged, mine is called the today tag. It's either tagged today or it's not. Is this making any sense at all?
Yeah, no, of course.
I probably just talked you out of ever trying it again based on how complex.
It's not. I'm not surprised. I'm just always conflicted about. I think I've come to the place. Everyone's going to have everyone's needs are going to be different to do any kind of like tech aided to do app and for me it's like I think I've come to the place where I know that what I need is something pretty simple that doesn't require that I commit to a certain kind of system or like framework or an entire discipline. Like I can't really, there's too many things in my schedule day to day that I can't control. So because I can't control a bunch of stuff, that means that I can't really commit to someone else's idea about a system for how to manage to-dos or times or things that you want to get done. So what I need is something that's pretty flexible, and what I have found that for me, flexible means simple, like only a few features, so that I can clear it out or adapt as my week changes and something unexpected happens.
I think that's the way that you become flexible as a to-do application, is you're either very complex or very simple. There's not really any room for middle ground. Like if you're in the middle, then you are making a decision. Like your app is basically now opinionated and people have to use it in the way that you want it to. And OmniFocus is sort of that way. Like its power does award great flexibility, but it still does say, hey, you need to use me in the way I was designed to be used.
Right.
Now, fortunately, the way it was designed to be used also enables great stuff like project templates and, reoccurring tasks and perspectives and all that nice stuff. So I'm into it. But yeah, it's an interesting area. So the other thing about time is that the idea of hitting a button that starts down a timer, this reminds me of, I'm trying to remember the Japanese task management philosophy, or like, I wouldn't even call it a philosophy. It's like a style of task management. I believe it's the word, hold on. I believe it's the word for tomato in Japanese. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't.
I'm butchering this. What's the it's like a philosophy of, okay, you spend like for every 25 minutes of hard focused work you take a 5-minute break.
Pomodoro.
Yeah, does that mean tomato?
I don't know, but I know that Pomodoro is that system.
There's a couple of great apps for Mac and iOS that do this, which are really cool, and I like to use them. I cannot remember the name of the one that's coming to my mind. Let me look at my App Store history here. But it's a great little toolbar app that runs on the Mac, and you just basically say, hey, how long do I want to be focused on this one task? 'Cause for me, I get really, like, I start one task and then I don't finish it. I move on to the next.
Right.
And I think that time is trying to solve the same problem, where, you want to just really stay focused on finishing one thing before moving on to the next. And this app has been, Be Focused is the name of the app for the Mac and iOS. Sounds kind of a little similar there. Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
I've made it in my outline here so that I have to say one too. And I feel like I've now talked so much about OmniFocus that I should just make OmniFocus my app of the week. Although OmniFocus is always working its way into every conversation I have. So that would be cheating if I did. So I'm going to say my app of the week is, I've been running the beta of iPad OS 13 on my iPad for about a month now. And Safari on the iPad is now a desktop class browser. You can run full native Google Docs in it with all of the features. You can run the Squarespace web editor in a Safari tab on the iPad, and it just feels like I haven't taken my Mac out of my bag and probably more than one time in the past month.
Wow.
Pretty cool. All right, well, I'll link time in the show notes. What are you listening to lately?
Let's see. Yeah, I can pull up some different playlists. I guess I should say that some of my musical, like how I spend time listening to music, has been a little bit guided by trying to learn about some elementary the fundamentals of production, how something should sound and be panned and be mastered and mixed and that kind of thing. So I'm not in a phase where I'm like listening to music because of pure musical interest. I'm in a phase of listening to music to try to get some tracks where I can, it's kind of, it helped as an instructional tool. The track is like an instructional tool. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, where are you going to find out what you should be listening to then?
Yeah, I don't. so far I haven't been checking out like blogs or resources online that recommend any particular artists or tracks. I've honestly been doubling down and kind of just biting the bullet and doing a lot of top 40 stuff because I want to know at least. I want to start somewhere simple where, okay, here's something I can imitate. Here's something that I can learn about this new kind of language and vocabulary for describing how to design sound, right? It's a common, I'm trying to I'm trying to find stuff that is widely adopted, and top 40s is widely adopted. So there's that. In terms of more, so okay, let me say this. One of the channels online that I use to learn more about how to use Ableton to produce music and export tracks is called Reid Stefan. It's REID space STEFAN, and it's pretty hilarious because his concept is that he does these instructional videos online, and it's with a puppet. So it's not, you're expecting to see some producer, and instead you see this puppet, and it looks ridiculous, and a lot of people are turned off by it. But it's really in-depth, engaging stuff with long-form tutorials for how to execute particular techniques in Ableton. And the reason why I bring him up in the context of music is because he has sample tracks that he makes. He's a producer, and so you can also listen to his music as a producer. And so I've been listening to his stuff out of necessity because he in these tutorials he'll be working on the tracks for the finished product that you hear.
Can you send me a link?
Yeah, I'll send it after the show.
Cool. Yeah,
Here,
leave it to you
right
to be listening to music for the sole purpose of learning audio production. So you're really getting into the Ableton Live thing, it sounds.
I mean, I don't know, if I qualify as really getting into it, but I can certainly, I can send you what I've been working on to give you a flavor, to give you a sense for, some of the progress that I've made. I don't think I'm anywhere near close to being ready to. Let's suppose I was gonna tell someone that they could pay me to produce their track, right? I don't feel comfortable doing that yet. But I've certainly made progress, and I've certainly had fun doing it. That's for sure.
Do you care if I include any of your stuff in the show notes to this episode?
I will take a look at what I have and see if I have anything.
In the spirit of promoting the learning process, Jon.
I know. I'll take a look, and I'll see if I have anything that I think is getting. I'm sort of right on the cusp where I'm getting ready to push some of the stuff that I've been working on out to the public or somewhere online, and I haven't even put together any of the tools for that. Like I haven't really pushed anything to a SoundCloud, or I haven't really put together a website or even a Facebook page or anything like that. So I'm kind of right at the point where I'm ready to put that stuff together. So if it comes together in time, hopefully it'll work out.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You're going to get a Bandcamp account?
Yeah. Maybe. I don't know. I haven't looked at Bandcamp in a long time. Yeah, I wanted to provide at least one other band that I've been listening to and checking out recently called Dawn of MIDI.
They're great.
Oh, so you know them?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, I really love what they did on Dysnomia.
Is that the one from about 3 years ago?
2013.
That close enough. That's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah, I've heard that. That made it onto one of the NPR 50 albums of the year worth checking out.
Nice.
I compile those into an Apple Music and Spotify playlist every year and publish it to my blog.
Yeah.
Actually, this year they did one on Apple Music, so they saved the work for me, and I made one on Spotify, or was it the other way around? I don't know. Real-time follow-up, Pomodoro technique. Pomodoro is the Italian word for tomato. I don't know where I was thinking, like, where did I get Japanese from? I don't know.
It happens.
And it's named after it because of those little tomato-shaped kitchen timers.
Ah.
Yeah. The technique
It all makes sense.
The technique uses a timer to break down work into intervals, traditionally 25 minutes in length, separated by short breaks. Each interval is known as a Pomodoro.
Gotcha.
Interesting. Gotcha. I've been listening to always a lot of music. I've been listening to a lot of Monk lately. Mm-hmm. But if there's an album I've been listening to, Snarky Puppy recently, or maybe not recently, but at some point, a bunch of live albums from around 2015 went onto the internet streaming services, and
right.
I have just been like, that's kind of the era of Snarky Puppy that I just like what they were doing a lot in that. I mean, I think their stuff is great and they continue to be excellent, but I don't know. I just, something about their lineup and their songwriting style around then, like the live, it's just a great time to listen to them live, and they've got a really full band. Like I've seen them live before where there doesn't seem to be as much space for the improvisations to really play off of one another. But I don't get that feeling at all listening to the Stockholm one is the one that I've been listening to the most.
Ah, nice. I'm always down with Snarky Puppy.
Yeah, it's hard to reject them when they come onto the speaker in the house.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, cool, man.
Is there anything else you want to talk about today on the air?
No, I think this is a great place to wrap it up.
I had no idea we would go natural learning. I love it.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad we got into it.
So, Jon, you know, I want people to be able to find your work on the internet. What is your current web presence? Where can people find out more about you?
All right, so that is, I mean, it's a well-timed question. Because normally my answer to that is I'm a hermit, and I intentionally kind of keep myself off the web for the most part, with a few exceptions that are more about my being lazy and not taking them down than anything else. But I'm working on getting together kind of an online web presence rebrand right now, where I'm going to have a blog as well as a place where you can see some of the music that I'm working on, and perhaps some of the more technology related work that I do. So to be continued on that. Maybe depending on when you publish this, I might have a bunch of links for you. Otherwise, stay tuned because I'm actively working on that right now.
Awesome. And on Twitter,
I do have a Twitter. I'm not active on it, but people are free to tweet me at Tippensian. It's Tippensian.
Right on.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, as always, this was great. Thank you for coming on to my very first episode of Music Ed Tech Talk.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Robby.
Yeah, and until next time.
See ya.
See ya.